My name is Delaney Brooks. I'm 29 years old. The letter arrived 4 days before my wedding, and by the time I finished reading it, I knew somebody in my family had lied about a child for more than 30 years. It was raining that afternoon, the kind of cold Virginia rain that makes the windows look bruised. I had just come off a 12-hour shift in the ICU at St. Anne's in Richmond. I still smelled like hospital soap and stale coffee. My feet were throbbing, my mascara had smudged under my eyes, and all I wanted was to kick off my shoes and sit on my kitchen floor for a minute before Noah got home. Instead, I found an ivory envelope propped against the fruit bowl. My name was written on the front in slanted blue ink I would have known anywhere. May. My grandmother had been dead for 3 weeks. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the envelope like it might explain itself. My grandmother had prepared for death the way some women prepared for winter. Carefully, quietly. Extra canned peaches in the pantry, labels on boxes. Her jewelry divided into little velvet pouches with handwritten notes. She'd probably been planning her own exit since the day my grandfather died. Still, seeing her handwriting after the funeral made my stomach tighten. I opened it with my thumb. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper folded in half. Laney girl, if your father asks to walk you down the aisle, don't answer him until you ask one question. Where did Rosalind Grace Brooks go on May 14th, 1992? If your mother tells you the truth, hold her hand. If she won't, look under my sewing table. Blue tin box. I have left something for both my granddaughters. Love you bigger than the sky, May. I read it 3 times. Rosalind Grace Brooks, both my granddaughters. I didn't have a sister, at least not one anybody had ever told me about. I sat down so hard the kitchen chair scraped across the tile. Outside, a car hissed through the wet street. Somewhere upstairs, our neighbor's dog barked twice and went quiet. It all kept moving, like the world didn't understand mine had just tilted. Noah came home 20 minutes later carrying a bag of Thai food and smiling in that tired, gentle way of his that always made me feel like maybe the world wasn't such a dangerous place after all. He stopped when he saw my face. What happened? I handed him the letter. He read it, slowly, then looked up. Noah taught middle school band, so he had the patience of a saint and the instincts of a paramedic. He never rushed a moment that mattered. Do you know who Rosalind is? No. And you think your grandmother meant this? My grandmother never wrote a word she didn't mean. He set the takeout on the counter and crouched in front of me. Okay, he said softly. Then we find out. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Because families like mine didn't keep harmless secrets. We kept the kind wrapped in politeness and Sunday clothes, the kind that sat at the dinner table smiling while everybody pretended not to smell smoke. I grew up in Richmond, mostly on the south side, in a brick duplex with a crooked porch and a mother who could make $5 look like 50 if it meant I needed school shoes. My mom, Teresa, worked at Bluebird Salon 6 days a week and picked up bookkeeping for 2 other businesses at night. My father, Randall Brooks, liked to describe himself as an entrepreneur, which mostly meant he was always chasing one big deal away from becoming the man he thought he deserved to be. When I was 8, he forgot my dance recital because he had a client dinner. When I was 12, he missed my tonsil surgery because his phone died. When I was 16, he showed up at my school awards ceremony with flowers and a photographer, because by then he'd learned appearances counted. He was charming in public, careless in private, and somehow always surprised when people noticed the difference. After my parents divorced, my mother never said a vicious word about him. Not once. She just kept going. She made casseroles when we were broke, fixed broken blinds with hair ties, cried only in the bathroom with the shower running. My grandmother May filled in the rest. She taught me how to sew a hem, how to tell when a man was lying by the way he repeated your name, how to keep a little cash hidden where nobody could find it. Love is wonderful, she used to say, pinning fabric against my shoulder, but never let it make you stupid. The hardest part was that I did love my father, even after all of it, maybe especially after all of it. There's something humiliating about loving the parent who makes you earn it. By the time I was grown, I had become the family translator. I could smooth over my father's lateness before my mother's jaw tightened. I could change the subject when my Aunt Colleen got too close to old stories. I could tell by the way Grandma May set down her fork whether she was angry or just disappointed. Then I met Noah Whitman at 26 in the cafeteria at St. Anne's when I spilled black coffee straight down the front of his pale blue shirt and burst into tears because I was on my 4th night shift and my patient had died an hour earlier. He looked down at the stain and said, "Well, that's one way to make an impression." I laughed so hard I snorted. That was it. He wasn't flashy. He didn't perform goodness. He just showed up. If he said he'd be there at 6, he was there at 5:53. If he asked how my mother was doing, he listened to the answer. When Grandma May got sick the year before, Noah drove her to appointments without being asked and never mentioned it afterward like he deserved a medal. So when he proposed under the sycamore tree in Browns Island last fall, I said yes before he finished the sentence. And somehow, because weddings have a way of dragging every buried thing into daylight, the closer ours got, the stranger my family felt. My father had become overly involved the moment he realized there would be photographs. He offered to pay for the rehearsal dinner, insisted he knew somebody who could upgrade the floral situation, and kept making comments about how meaningful it would be for him to walk me down the aisle after everything. After everything. As if fatherhood were a storm we had both survived together. My mother smiled through it all in that quiet, aching way she had when she was trying not to cost anybody any trouble. Now I was sitting in my kitchen with a dead woman's letter in my hand, and I could feel all those careful years starting to crack. "I need to go to my mom's," I said. Noah nodded immediately. "I'm driving." My mother lived 20 minutes away in the same little house she'd bought after the divorce. White siding, blue shutters, wind chimes on the porch. She opened the door wearing leggings and one of the salon's faded t-shirts, reading glasses low on her nose. "Baby, what's wrong?" I didn't say hello. I handed her the letter. I watched her face as she read it. First confusion, then recognition. Then something I had only seen once before, the day Grandma May's coffin disappeared behind the curtain at the cemetery chapel. My mother sat down without looking for the chair. "Mom," I said, and my own voice sounded far away. "Who is Rosalind Grace Brooks?" Her hands started shaking. No answer. I crouched beside her. "Mom," she whispered, "I hoped that name would die before it found you." Something cold slid through me. "No," I said. "No, you don't get to say that and stop talking." She pressed her fingers over her mouth. Tears filled her eyes so fast, it was like they'd been waiting. Noah stepped back toward the hallway, giving us space. "Please tell me the truth." My mother looked at me for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "You had an older sister." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because the words made no sense. They floated in the room like a language I didn't speak. "What?" "She was born 5 years before you." My knees gave out and I sat on the floor. I remember staring at the pattern in her rug because it was the only thing that stayed still. "Don't do this halfway," I said. "Don't you dare." My mother closed her eyes. "Her name was Rosalind Grace." "Where is she?" Silence. I looked at her so hard my face hurt. "Where is she?" "I don't know." Something snapped inside me then, sharp and clean. "You don't know?" I said, louder. "You don't know where your own daughter is?" She flinched, and I hated myself for it immediately, because my mother had flinched her whole life at the wrong people. But I was already crying, angry tears, hot ones. "Tell me what happened." She stared at her hands. I was 19. Your father was 26. We weren't married yet. He had a business that was failing and more pride than money. I went into labor early. There were complications. I lost a lot of blood. She swallowed. When I woke up, Randall was sitting beside the bed crying. He told me the baby didn't make it. I stopped breathing. He said she was born too small. He said there was nothing they could do. I begged to see her, but he told me not to remember her that way. Your grandmother, she broke off. May was outside my room, and when they let her in, she just held me and cried. So I believed him. The room buzzed in my ears. And that was a lie, I said. My mother nodded once. I found out 6 weeks later. I looked up so fast my neck hurt. What? She was crying now, open and helpless, no grace left in it. I found a hospital bracelet in Randall's truck. Not mine, the baby's. Rosalind Grace Brooks. And there was an envelope in the glove compartment, full of cash. More money than we had ever seen. I asked him where it came from. Her voice changed when she said the next part. Flattened. Old. He told me I should be grateful somebody wanted what we couldn't afford to keep. Noah made a sound behind me, just one stunned breath. I stared at my mother. No words came. She wiped her face with the heel of her palm. I thought if I screamed loud enough, the walls would fall down. I threw a lamp at him. He grabbed me so hard he left bruises on my arm. He told me nobody would believe me over him. He told me if I went to the police, he'd say I was unstable after losing the baby. And the worst part? Her mouth trembled. The worst part was I still didn't know where she was. Alive, dead, sold, given away. I had nothing but a bracelet and a bruise. I got up too fast and nearly hit the coffee table. You knew this all my life? My mother nodded. I tried to find her. May tried too. We asked questions quietly. Somebody at the hospital said a private adoption had been arranged through a lawyer in Charlottesville. Then the trail vanished. People closed ranks. Your father's family had connections. Money started showing up for his business after that. Then I got pregnant with you. She looked at me with a kind of broken shame I will never forget. And I was scared if I pushed too hard, I'd lose you too. I turned away because I couldn't stand the look on her face. Anger is easy when the villain is clear. Harder when grief has been living in your mother's body for 30 years, like a second skeleton. Why didn't Grandma tell me? She wanted to, many times. I begged her not to until after the wedding. She said there would never be a right time. My mother laughed once, bitter and exhausted. Looks like she was right. I pulled the letter back out and read the line again. Blue tin box. I'm going to Grandma's house. My mother stood up immediately. Delaney, no, not this time. Nobody gets to decide what I can handle. Grandma May's house sat on the edge of Chesterfield County, a low yellow farmhouse with a pecan tree in the yard and a porch swing that complained whenever anybody sat in it. She had left the house to me in her will, which my father had called sentimental but impractical, as if grief were a storage problem. The key still stuck in the front door. Inside, the place smelled like cedar, old books, and the lavender sachets she tucked into every drawer. Her sewing room was at the back of the house, exactly as she'd left it. Spools of thread in coffee mugs, a pincushion shaped like a tomato, her reading lamp, her chair. I dropped to my knees and reached under the sewing table. My fingers found metal. The blue tin box was dented on one side and cold in my hands. Inside were 3 things: a newborn hospital bracelet, a folded copy of a deed transfer dated 2 months after Rosalind's birth, and a photograph. Not a baby picture, a school picture. A girl around 10 years old with dark curls, serious eyes, and my grandmother's mouth. On the back, in May's handwriting, were 4 words: Rosalind. called herself Rose. I sat there on the floor with the photo shaking in my hand, until Noah came in behind me and crouched beside me without speaking. He looked at the picture, then at me. "She looks like you," he said quietly. "No," I whispered. "She looks like what I might have looked like if someone had gotten there first." The deed transfer was worse. The property my father used to launch his first successful development project, the one he always bragged had changed everything for our family, had been signed over by a trust connected to a Charlottesville attorney. The same month Rosalind disappeared. I didn't need a law degree to understand what I was looking at. My father hadn't just abandoned a child. He had built his life on her. By the time I drove to his house that night, I was so cold with rage I felt almost calm. He lived in a brick colonial now, all clean lines and expensive landscaping, with his second wife, Beth, who loved neutral throw pillows and pretending complicated men were just misunderstood. He opened the door wearing loafers and a golf pullover, like I'd interrupted an ad campaign. "Lainey," he said, smiling, "I was just about to call you about the rehearsal seating." I shoved the photo against his chest. The smile vanished. For the first time in my life, I saw real fear in my father's face. "Who is she?" I asked. Beth appeared in the hallway behind him. "Randall?" He didn't answer. I held up the hospital bracelet. "Try again." His eyes flicked to it and then back to me, calculating. Always calculating. "Come inside," he said. "No." "Delaney, this is not a front porch conversation." "That sounds like a confession." Beth's face went white. "Randall, what is she talking about?" He turned on her so fast I almost pitied her. "Go upstairs." "No," I said. "She can stay. I'm done helping you look decent." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he sighed like I was being unreasonable. "I made a difficult decision a long time ago." I laughed in his face. "A difficult decision?" My voice shook. "Did you sell my sister?" "Don't use that word." "What word should I use, Dad? Help me out. Because trafficked feels a little harsh for the neighborhood, but it's growing on me." His jaw tightened. "Your mother and I were broke. We were kids. The baby was premature, Teresa was half dead, and there were people, good people, who desperately wanted a family and could give that child everything we could not. You told Mom she died." He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She would never have agreed. That sentence, that one sentence, it split whatever remained between us right down the middle. I stepped closer. "So you lied to a 19-year-old girl who had just given birth, took her baby, took money, and used it to build your life." "I gave that child a chance." I slapped him. I had never hit anyone in my life. The sound cracked across the porch. Beth gasped. My father touched his cheek slowly, more offended than sorry. "You self-righteous little—" "No." My voice came out low and deadly. "You don't get to call me names after what you did. You don't get to say my nickname. You don't get to walk me down any aisle. You don't get to breathe my air like this is a disagreement." For 1 second, something ugly flashed in his face. Not regret, not grief. Possession. "Be careful," he said. "You can destroy more than me with this." I understood then. He was still threatening women with collapse, still gambling on our instinct to protect the family from the truth. I leaned in close enough that he had to hear me over the pounding in my own chest. "Good," I said. "Let it burn." I walked away before he could answer. The emotional collapse didn't happen on his porch. It happened in my car 2 blocks later. I pulled over behind an empty gas station, dropped my forehead to the steering wheel, and sobbed so hard I thought I might choke. Not graceful tears, not movie tears, animal grief. Grief for a sister I had never met, for my mother at 19, for my grandmother carrying this alone, for this stupid little girl in me who had spent years hoping her father would someday become the man she defended. Noah got into the passenger seat without saying anything. He must have followed me. When I finally looked up, he handed me a wad of napkins from the glove compartment. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "For what?" "For making all of this happen right before the wedding." He stared at me like I'd said the sky had apologized for rain. "Delaney," he said, "your father sold the baby and lied about it for 3 decades. You are not the inconvenience in this story." That broke me all over again. The next morning, I went back to my mother's house. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her robe, a mug of coffee gone cold in front of her. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "I went to see him," I said. She nodded once, like she already knew. He admitted it. My mother closed her eyes. I sat across from her, and for a long time neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been rotting in me since the night before. "Did you ever stop loving him before you stopped being afraid of him?" My mother looked up. "That is the meanest question you've ever asked me," she said softly. I started crying before she finished the sentence. "I know." She reached across the table and took my hand anyway. "That's the thing nobody tells young women," she said. "Sometimes fear puts on love's clothes. Sometimes it speaks in a familiar voice. And by the time you realize what you've been living beside, you've already lost years." I squeezed her hand so hard our rings dug into our skin. "I'm sorry, Mom." She shook her head. "No. Be angry. God knows somebody should have been." We spent that afternoon going through everything May had left behind. Old address books, church bulletins, envelopes with no return address. At the bottom of a dresser drawer, inside a recipe box, we found 3 birthday cards mailed over the years to a post office box in Charlottesville. No letters inside, just unsigned cash and a pressed flower. My grandmother had found her, or at least found enough to keep loving her from a distance. By evening, Noah had tracked down the post office box through a friend whose brother worked in county records. It had recently been closed by a woman named Rosalind Monroe. Monroe. A name, finally. I found her online 2 hours later. Rosalind Monroe, 34. Landscape architect, Durham, North Carolina. There were only a few public photos. In one, she was standing in front of a community garden, wearing work boots and a denim jacket, one hand on her hip, laughing at something outside the frame. She had my grandmother's mouth, and my eyes. I stared at that screen until my vision blurred. Noah sat beside me. "Do you want to call?" "I don't know what I want." "You don't have to know yet." But time had stopped feeling polite. My wedding was in 48 hours. My father was texting about Tuck's pickup like he hadn't detonated our lives. My mother was walking around like someone had dug up her bones. And somewhere, 2 states away, was a woman who had gone 34 years not knowing she had been mourned by people who were never allowed to keep her. So I called. Straight to voicemail. I hung up before the tone. Coward. I tried again. This time I left a message. My voice shook so badly I barely recognized it. "Hi, my name is Delaney Brooks. I think we may be related. My grandmother, May Holloway, may have sent you birthday cards. I'm sorry if this is insane. It probably sounds insane. But if the date May 14th, 1992 means anything to you, please call me back." I almost threw up after. The night of the rehearsal dinner, my father still showed up in a navy suit, silver tie, smile polished bright. I had told him he was no longer welcome to walk me down the aisle. He replied with a text that said, "We will discuss this like adults," as if adulthood were what had been missing. The dinner was at a restaurant by the river. String lights, white tablecloths, too much charm. My mother wore dark green and looked beautiful in the tired way women do when they've survived something bigger than vanity. Aunt Colleen came and sat beside her like a bodyguard. Beth arrived alone, eyes red, lips pressed thin. She didn't speak to my father once. Halfway through the meal, my father stood up with a glass in his hand. I felt the whole room brace. He smiled around at our friends and Noah's family and began, "I just want to say how proud I am of my daughter. Sit down, I said. It wasn't loud. That made it worse. Every fork stopped. My father looked at me, still holding the glass. Delaney, you don't get to toast me. His face hardened. This is not the time. No, I said. 34 years ago would have been the time. My mother inhaled sharply. Noah put his hand over mine under the table, but he didn't stop me. I stood up. The room blurred around the edges, but my voice came out clear. This man told my mother her baby died. She didn't. He took that child, traded her future for money, and built the life he's been congratulating himself on ever since. Silence fell so hard it felt physical. My father slowly set down the glass. Delaney, he said in that warning tone I knew from childhood. I laughed. What? You want me to protect the room? You should have thought of that when you sold your daughter. Beth covered her mouth and started crying. Noah's mother whispered, "Oh my God." My father turned red, then gray. You are confused. No, my mother said, and every head turned toward her. She stood up beside me. For a second she looked small. Then she didn't. No, she's not confused, she said. I've been confused. I've been ashamed. I've been afraid. But tonight, for the first time in 34 years, I'm none of those things. She looked straight at him. You buried me with that lie. Not anymore. My father glanced around the room, searching for sympathy, strategy, escape. He found none. Noah rose from his chair and moved to my side. You need to leave. My father stared at him. This is a family matter. Noah didn't blink. Exactly. Randall Brooks left that restaurant without another word. I thought that would be the climax. It wasn't. The real final turn came the next morning, 2 hours before the ceremony, when there was a knock on the bridal suite door. I was sitting in front of a mirror while my cousin pinned my hair, feeling hollowed out and overfilled at the same time. My phone had buzzed all night with numbers I didn't know. Reporters, probably. Somebody had already posted about the rehearsal dinner. I hadn't looked. There was another knock. My cousin opened the door. A woman stood there in a gray coat, rain in her hair, face pale with nerves. For a second, I forgot how to move. She looked older than the photo, of course. Realer, tired around the eyes, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with trying. She held May's letter in one hand. I got your voicemail when I landed, she said. Her voice was lower than mine, steadier. I drove straight here. Nobody in the room breathed. I'm Rosalind, she said, but everybody calls me Rose. I stood up so fast the chair tipped over behind me. She looked at me the same way I was looking at her, like she was searching her own face in a mirror that had arrived 30 years late. Then she said the sentence that undid me. She used to send me $5 every birthday, with a daisy pressed flat inside the card. I always wondered who loved me like that. I started crying before I reached her. So did she. 34 years of lies shattered in one night. At her wedding, Lainey discovered the sister stolen from her family, exposed her father's darkest secret, and chose justice over blood. But when a dying grandmother's letter revealed one final witness still alive, the real revenge was only beginning.